Hey everybody, Adam from Atlas Gunworks. So we've thoroughly upset the internet with our video, Don't Grease Your Guns, and it probably should have been titled, Don't Grease Your 1911s. And that's not even entirely true. So let me, this is a 2.0 video. I'm gonna dive into why we don't like grease and the couple places where we are okay with grease. So let's jump over to the bench here. I've got a brand new Athena. I'm going to pull this thing apart here. And the generic thought process here is that the cool part about oil, what works well, especially if you use a quality thin oil, is that you put a little oil on the gun, and as you use the gun, and I'm making up numbers, but let's say for 200 to 500 rounds, the oil runs through the gun. Most of it's getting displaced, but it's taking carbon, and if there were to be metal shavings or brass shavings or any unburned gunpowder, remember that there's an explosion going on right here, right? There's an explosion here every time the gun goes bang. So taking all of the byproduct from the gun cycling, the explosion, all those things, and and a nice thin oil's moving away from, or moving out of the gun at some pace, and it's taking that stuff with us, or with it. And the easiest thing to do is then to just replace the thin oil, right? And so we're advocates of oiling the gun every time you shoot it. And I don't clean the guns a ton, my personal guns. I usually shoot them till the slide is a little sluggish. But I re-oil every time I take the gun out. So this is what I'm going to show you what I would do for a quick oil before I shoot the gun. And then we're going to, or you know what, we'll dive into the two places for the folks who want to skip to the end of this video where I'm okay with oil, or I say oil, okay with grease, is the mag catch. It's an item you almost never take the mag catch apart. A little grease in there. There's no vapor or anything flowing through that area. A little grease in there is fine. Typically from the factory here at Atlas, it's getting some oil but no grease. And then the mainspring housing as well. That spring and the mainspring. Again, it's not getting maybe just a very little bit of vapor flow, but it's for the most part, a concealed unit, and that there's nothing crazy going on in there. Those are the two places where you could use grease. And so here's what we don't like about grease. This video is at the mid 2022. So there's the new guide rod from Atlas Gunworks toolless. We make them in 4.6 inch, which our previous supplier wouldn't make for us. So we bought a 5-axis Swiss turn and made them ourselves. So that's a super nice new addition to the lineup. What we don't like about grease is the opposite of what I like about oil. The oil's flowing through the gun, it's taking carbon and potentially anything hazardous out of the gun with it. Grease stays in one spot. So if you can see this disco rail here, it's a little bit discolored. There's a good angle. So that stripe right there is gold, that's brass. So this is dragging across the top round of the mag that's not being fed, and it's displacing some brass. And this is super mild, it's not a problem, but anybody who's cleaned a lot or shot a lot and then cleaned guns is going to see brass shavings in the gun. Same thing with metal shavings. If something bad happens, if we get something stuck somewhere where it's not supposed to be, and we create a small metal shaving, some of them are micro, you can't even see them, then we don't want those to stay in the gun, right? Because that's going to be an abrasive. So imagine you have grease on the top of your barrel here, and there's brass shavings in here, and just think about it like sandpaper, right? And it's gonna, that it has nowhere to go. The grease is going to hold the little pieces of metal, and then metal against metal is going to work like an abrasive, and that's going to cause problems. So we're, again, big fans of oil. I'll jump into what oils to use. Someday we're going to come out with our own oil, and we're going to call it Red Magic, partly because the additives I like are red, but there is no magic. Use a good thin oil. If you want to use Mobile One, fine. Some of them are temperature specific. The viscosity is going to determine that. So if you shoot in 10 below, like we might here in Vermont, you're going to need something that's really thin compared to if you shoot in Arizona all year. So just know where you are and what works well. And if you're going to be in cold environments, test that. But any good, there's like 800 oils and they all have these nano this and that. It's all ridiculous. A good thin oil is a good thin oil, and most of that stuff's the same stuff repackaged. And our Red Magic will be a combination of things, but it'll be a formula that's probably not uncommon. So how do we oil the gun, right? For the quick oil, so I shoot this gun. I'm going to try to shoot the gun for 3,000 rounds and not clean it. But every time right before I shoot, I'm just going to field strip it like this. I'm going to get a whole bunch on. Again, this is 1911 specific. If you want to use grease on your AK, and it says to use grease on your AK, we don't know anything about that. I assume whatever you know or read will probably be better than the information I would give you about an AK. But on 1911, stop using grease. Oil that barrel up nice. I'm going to come in here and hit the slide pretty good. I'm going to hit the entire rail line. We like the needle applicators. Barrel goes back in. I'm going to give the guide rod a stripe. The guide rod's going to go in the gun. I'm going to stripe that top of that spring of that guide rod. Remember, this thing's getting really beat up. It's pretty violent what goes on there. I'm going to put a couple drops on the top of the disco. You're going to see all that flow right through here, the trigger group, but that helps a lot. A little bit on the top of the rails. Most of this is, and then a little bit on the sides. Most of that's going to come out the back. You'll see here when we go to put the slide on. And then I put a dot right on the back of the rails when I come on, and hopefully I'm just pushing that forward. And then never hurts to have some on your slide stop. And then you're going to see some come out the back of the gun, right? It's bleeding out the back. That's what I want. Displace anything I don't want. As I shoot the gun, it's going to bleed. Again, some more out the back. No big deal. Wipe it off with your finger or a rag. Let it sit there. It doesn't matter. When you take this gun apart down all in here, you're going to start to have grease just weeping kind of out of it. But that's what we want. I rack it back. My barrel's all wet. And the more you shoot it, the drier it gets. But typically, you should be able to go 500 rounds. And remember, gravity is going to move oil as well as the operation of the gun. So if we just let the gun sit in the safe like this for a year and a half, some of that oil is moving because of gravity, right? The gun's vertical like this, or if it's this way, it's flowing that way. So if I had a gun sitting, I would oil it before I shot it. I always oil it. Let's say I only shoot 200 rounds. Next time I go out, I'm going to oil it, because I can't remember if last time I shot 200 or 500 or 1,000 or whatever. So I just oil the gun before you use it. And if you do that every time, you're not going to have any issues. So quick recap. Use oil on your 1911s. We don't know anything about other platforms. A nice thin oil works really well. Re-oil every time you shoot. If you are going to use any grease, the only two spots that are appropriate is inside the mag catch and the mainspring housing where the springs are. Hope to see you guys on the range soon.